All right. Welcome, Joaquin. Good to see you. Good afternoon for you in California. Good morning here from Hong Kong. Let me introduce our today's speaker. Dr. Joaquin Quiñonero Candela, I hope I pronounced your name right. He serves on the board of directors of the Partnership on AI and on the Spanish government's advisory board on AI. Joaquin recently resigned from Facebook to fully support his wife with rebuilding her career. Until September 2021, which is only last month, Joaquin was the distinguished technical lead for responsible AI at Facebook. Before this, he built and led the Facebook AML, applied machine learning team, driving product impact at scale through applied research in machine learning and all applied AI disciplines. For example, computer vision, natural language processing, computational photography, speech recognition, ranking, and more. AML also built the unified AI platform that powers all production applications of AI at Facebook. Before Facebook, Joaquin taught at the University of Cambridge, worked at Microsoft Research, and conducted postdoctoral research at 3 institutions in Germany, including the Max Planck Institute for Biological Cybernetics. He received his PhD from the Technical University of Denmark. And I must say, how many languages do you speak, Joaquin? This is always my favorite question. 5, 6, 7?
No, I think I'm fluent in 4.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yes, and I think that I always believe that speaking multiple languages and having lived in work in different cultures give people somehow a more 3D perspective on things in the world, doesn't it? Especially we're talking about responsible AI today. Now, I also want to mention that you are a very, very excellent cook, and I look forward to your YouTube channel now that you are going to be leaning out from the rat race or the corporate path. I look forward to your YouTube channel. So today we are going to have 1 hour of fireside chat between you and me. We're going to talk about responsible AI. We're just going to check, and then we're going to talk about your important issue to stay back and stay home to support your wife's career, which is very rare today for men to choose to do. Now, and after 1 hour of fireside chat, we will give the participant audience 30 minutes to ask you questions. So they can ask questions in the chat, or there's a Q&A place for them to chat. So starting, we're both on the Partnership on AI. How about, can you tell people what it is, and how did you get interested in sort of responsible AI? So people know about AI. What is responsible AI? And so tell us just from your perspective.
Yeah, maybe I'll answer the second question first, and then I'll talk about the partnership on AI later. I made the transition to be on a more of an academic or scientific track in AI or machine learning, actually, because at the time I would only call it ML, and even today I think I would most of the time call it ML. I made that big transition in 2009 when I was working at Microsoft Research in Cambridge in the UK, and I had the opportunity to start a team on the engineering side of the house. I left Microsoft Research to join the Bing team at the moment where the Bing search engine launched to the world, which was in the summer of 2009. And so I left Microsoft Research, and I was asked to build a team. I was asked to build the click prediction team for ads to optimize ads ranking on Bing. And since then, the past 12 years, I have spent helping deploy AI and ML at scale into all kinds of products. At Facebook, like you said earlier, I had the honor to be able to build and lead the applied ML team that served the entire company on pretty much every application of AI that you can think of, and for every single product in the family of Facebook products. And I think over the years, I think there's been a collective awakening of the societal and human consequences that AI can have that are either unpredictable or harmful or things that we don't understand, right? I remember that at NeurIPS, I believe, and then someone can correct me if you know in the audience, I believe that the fairness, accountability, and transparency workshop in the workshop sessions, I believe started in around 2014. And I remember that it was kind of interesting because it was one of those exotic workshops where you're like, oh, what is this thing? And that's only 2014, right? It's only 7 years ago, right? We need to think that this is only 7 years ago, right? And I remember that it caught my attention because we had been building models for ads, and you ask yourself questions like, well, if I knew the gender of the user, should I use that as an input or not? And I remember that at the time I tried to ask people, is it okay to use that or not? And no one knew, right? And so these questions, they kind of stayed in the back of my mind a little bit. And then I guess at Facebook, we had a pretty wild success with the applied ML team. We had thousands of engineers, designers, PMs across the company using the tools and the platforms that the team built. And then little by little, I think my attention started to shift more about like, well, now that AI is shaping so many products, and in fact, most Facebook products could not exist without AI. And the same, if you think about TikTok, the same is true. YouTube, the same is true. Amazon, the same is true, right? You keep going, right? What is it that we don't know? What is it that we don't understand? And there we can get a little bit to the partnership on AI or other. There's many organizations. There's also the global partnership on AI, GPAI, which is different from the partnership on AI. I'm also an expert on the GPAI as it happens, which is very confusing. I think there's a general awareness that while AI is probably the biggest technological revolution humanity has ever seen, and we're only getting started, right? And I think that generates a lot of excitement, and it should. I think that we're also starting to understand that we're going to be facing a number of really hard challenges. Many of them are actually trade-offs, dilemmas, right? Like, okay, I can have the benefit of allocating healthcare more equitably to people who need it the most, but what kind of biases can there be in the algorithm that does that, right? And of course, you can go back and say, oh, am I more comfortable with humans making those consequential decisions? Not clear, right? I mean, Daniel Kahneman would tell us, humans are pretty terrible at making decisions too, right? So there's a lot of promise, but there's a lot of risk as well. So we've seen in the last years, companies, nonprofit organizations, think tanks, academia come up with expectations that AI should have in order to be built responsibly. I'll just list a couple of them for illustration. Fairness, avoiding bias, algorithmic bias, or unfair algorithmic bias. Discrimination is a big one. There's, of course, transparency and control. There's questions of accountability and governance. There's, of course, privacy. There's security and many more, depending on how you count. So the Partnership on AI is a nonprofit organization that was co-founded by both for-profit and non-profit organizations. So to give you an example, on the board, there are people that serve in organizations like the MacArthur Foundation or the ACLU, for example. But there's also people who come from IBM or Microsoft or Apple, Google, DeepMind, Amazon. So it's a pretty interesting body that I think its biggest power is that it's a convening organization where people who normally would maybe hate each other and not talk to each other can actually sit down and talk to each other, because the thing in common is to understand and anticipate the risks that AI poses, and then make expert recommendations, or maybe come up with best practices. And even ideally, one of the visions for me, of course, I would like the Partnership on AI to not only propose best practices, but actually to have a way in the future when it has capacity to even give feedback, right? So that companies can voluntarily go and say, hey, could you tell me, am I in the yellow zone, in the red zone, in the green zone? Like, what do you think? Anyway, Pascale, you have to interrupt me because once I start talking,
No,
I can
it's all
go
right.
and go and go.
This is very, very interesting. So, but I want to dig a little deeper about the motivation of you getting interested in responsible AI. We all have built careers in AI for decades, and today, there are people who just continue working on AI, and they don't care about responsible AI. But what is your motivation? What was your motivation in getting interested in this? Why should we care about responsible AI? Are we doing this just because for PR or marketing? Why are we doing this? Why do you want to do it?
No, thank you. And it's a deep question, really, and an excellent question. I think there's many elements to the answer to the question. They range from the fact that when I was at high school, I went to high school, I think you said it earlier, I lived in many places. I went to a French high school in Morocco. And I went there from kindergarten all the way to the baccalaureate, right? And I remember that when I was a senior and I was deciding, how do I want to graduate? Well, sorry, not a senior, I was maybe sophomore, whenever it was that I had to decide whether I went on a sciences track or I went on a humanities or social science track, right? And I remember that my heart was torn in two. I was 50-50. It was pure agony. I loved history. I absolutely loved philosophy so much because I was fascinated by the science of understanding how societies work and what choices do they make, right, to govern themselves. At the same time, I love math and engineering. So I decided to go that route, but that division stayed since forever, right? And I think that through the years, I have always been fascinated by products that are extremely well designed, that really work for the individual and that make people's lives better. But I've also been fascinated by technologies that have a profound social impact. The reason, one of the key reasons actually I joined Facebook was the Arab Spring in 2011. When I saw what was going on, when I saw how people were using social media, I thought, wow. I mean, obviously, as we know now, there are risks that are as big as the benefits or bigger, right? But at the time, for me, it was like, wow, this is a transformative technology. And so for me, what always has excited me about technology is not the technology for the sake of technology. It's really, what does it do for individual humans and what does it do for society?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. You almost articulate exactly my motivation and my trajectory of getting into AI. I also started being very, very interested in philosophy, and I love math and literature, and I love science fiction. And I just wanted, just like to build tomorrow's world today, right? And that's led to my 30 years of career in AI. But today I feel another reason I want to do responsible AI like you is that we care deeply about humanity, right? We are humanists at heart. Many of AI researchers and developers are humanists at heart. That's why we do AI instead of some other kind of technology, right? So as humanists, we care deeply about our fellow human beings. So I think actually, we will talk about the other topic in maybe 15 minutes, but this is also about like if you're working on something for people, and AI is a technology that's works in close collaboration with people, right? Then we need to care about people even more than other technology. So and this humanist motivation is very important for those who do AI, practice AI. And the division you were talking about, I think is also very true. As much as, a lot of maybe technologists were not trained in humanities. And now today we face the challenge of reconciliating the technology we do and the societal impact it has, and we're not all prepared for it, right? We were working on this very core technology divorced from any humanist consideration for a very, very long time. Now we are confronted with this sudden impact of what we do. So I have the feeling that in the AI research, not just the product side, but the research side, we're getting like trying to play catch up. All the workshops that came up, all the special tracks in all the top AI conferences and even ethics committee and so on have become commonplace today, just since I think a few years ago. And so we technologists need to learn more about humanities, need to be more trained in humanities. But I also see the other side of things, which is that there's a lot of misunderstanding of technology, and also I would say misunderstanding of technologists. People see us as this kind of, sometimes even nefarious, Dr. Frankenstein's working on things that, and even they think that AI has, it's funny for me to hear this kind of statements where they say, AI is going to take over, AI is going to harm us, AI, as if AI is a sentient being, So what do you think about this? Like, how can we, are humans ready for AI? How can we go forward, together with AI and the human society? Sometimes I'm not even sure the society is ready for the kind of technology we're pushing out there. What do you think?
Oh, I think humanity is not ready for AI. I don't think society is ready for AI. And what I mean with not ready for AI, what I mean by that is I don't think that we have the mechanisms in place to have proper governance, in particular participatory governance, so that people who might be impacted by certain decisions can have their voices heard. I don't think, maybe one very clear example is, think about AI regulation today, as we know it. And then close your eyes and think about, how do you imagine AI regulation 50 years from now? Will it be different? Of course it will be different. Of course it will be a lot more sophisticated and evolved, right? So we are very far away from, I think, having the regulatory frameworks, but even I think you were alluding to even like the public understanding of the technology, I think is not where it needs to be. But then what do you do? Should we like pause progress? Should we pause, developing AI? Should we pause deploying it into products? I think that's a very tough decision to make when you see the benefits, right? In any sector that AI enters. So I think that we need to be comfortable with this idea that we are not ready, but that we are going to have to go ahead anyway. And we're going to have to build the regulation, the public awareness, the self-imposed regulation, self-imposed transparency and accountability. We're going to have to be doing that as we go, right? We will get it wrong, of course, but I think neither of the extremes is good, right? Going ahead carelessly is obviously not acceptable. But then again, I think pushing the big brake and stopping everything is also actually a pretty disastrous solution when you think about the benefits, right? So I think we just have to embrace discomfort, and I think the learning has to be mutual. It's pretty clear that we need to keep pushing investments in the public awareness and public understanding of AI. And I think when we say that, I think we need to push the public understanding of basic things like statistical reasoning, right? And data-based decisions and decision-making, for example, right? We need to obviously keep pushing regulation as much as we can. And it's clear that we need to keep educating, I think, computer scientists and AI practitioners in just like the vocabulary, right? Just like understanding the fact, some basic concepts of maybe political science and moral philosophy, understanding that if you are deploying a content moderation algorithm, right, or a content ranking algorithm, there are different choices that maybe prioritize either the benefit of the group versus the benefit of the individual. And there's no right or wrong answer, but you need to know that these things are connected. You need to know that the choices you're making in your objective function, right, or the choices you're making in how you calibrate or equalize outcomes across groups mathematically and via code. What does that mean, right? What context does that live in, and who should you talk to, right? Anyway, now to try to turn this into something exciting and positive, I have had an amazing time helping build the responsible AI team at Facebook, because it's given me the opportunity to talk a lot to people who are legal scholars, policymakers. You and I know the community is small. We know people in common, like Chloe Bacalar, who is a professor of political science and moral philosophy, with whom I've worked a lot. And I think that when fields have to come together and intersect, I think that's where the magic happens. And it's I think we should also see the positive side of this, which is that we are going to have amazing cross-disciplinary interactions where maybe political scientists and moral philosophers were feeling very lonely in the past couple of decades, and now all of a sudden everybody wants to talk to them. So I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, so I will do a shameless plug here about our Center for AI Research at HKUST. We are actually I think it's probably the most interdisciplinary AI center in the world today. My associate director is Professor Kelly Tsai, who is the Dean of Humanities and Social Science, and she's also here with us. I hope she'll interact with you later on. So yes, indeed, it's a very, very multidisciplinary area. It has to be. And so I'm glad to hear that when you were working at Facebook, you also involved moral philosophers and social scientists. And so let's talk about, if you don't mind, like I think a lot of people are very interested in hearing about perhaps a little bit about, social media recommendation systems, right? So again, you are no longer working for Facebook, but I hope you can speak freely from your point of view. What do you think the benefits and harms? Today, people are all conflicted. I see a lot of people on Facebook complaining about Facebook, so which is very ironic, and that they just cannot get off the Facebook. But you mentioned earlier about benefits and harms. So how do you think, from both technologists' point of view, like how you think, whatever you can say, or how we can do better, and then from the user point of view, what they can expect? In my view, there's one thing I think should be possible, which is to just allow users to turn off anything they don't want.
Yeah.
Today I can turn off the ads from Facebook. I can turn off, recommendations. I can turn off, I can essentially turn off everything and go back to the Facebook of, let's say, 1993, right? I remember Facebook in 1993, the ads were like random. And it was just like not organized at all. And I if I want to find my friends, I have to search for a particular person I might or might not find. So, and then there were recommendations of connectivity and recommendations of ads. But why don't we just let people turn off everything they want? I'm just saying this.
Yeah, I mean, to address directly the issue of control, and then I'll zoom out and talk about benefits and risks of recommender systems, in particular of social recommender systems. If someone puts me in the cabin of a Boeing Dreamliner, of a 787, while we're approaching for landing, and tell me, here, is that enough control for you? Do you have enough switches and buttons? I'd be pretty terrified and unhappy, and I would almost certainly pick a configuration that gets us all crashed or something like that, right? And so I think when we talk about control, we have to talk about meaningful control. And I'm personally passionate about minimalistic design that really gives me. It's almost like the way I like to think about it, for those people who like information theory, I like to think almost about building a good source code that has only the symbols that I need, where where I can transmit a maximum number of bits of information about what I want to do with a minimum number of levers and controls, right? I have colleagues at different companies, I will not reveal names, but that have run experiments where you give people a lot more control and choices, and here's the categories that you can follow. You're seeing this thing because you follow this and that, turn individually this on and off. People do it a couple of times and they forget to do it. It stays stuck in a bad state. It doesn't help. So I think it's important to keep trying, right? I mean, I think meaningful control is extremely difficult to achieve. And I think we should definitely put a lot of effort into that for sure, but it's hard. But back to your question of risks and benefits. Let's start with some of the benefits. So if we talk about Facebook specifically, one thing that we forget is that there are over 10 million advertisers on Facebook. And these advertisers, the majority of them are small businesses, and many of them are non-profit organizations. They're just people who want to reach out to other people. Because of the use of machine learning to increase relevance and to reach the audience you're most interested in, for that reason, the cost of reaching out to your intended audience has dropped so much that a long tail of very small businesses can now exist because they can find their audiences thanks to ML. It's as simple as that. That's reality, right? That's a fact. And I happen to know a couple of these businesses personally. I have a friend who retired early and who actually has a company where he makes artisanal chocolate. And the funny thing is, I learned that he was doing that not because he told me, because we're friends, but we're not talking all the time. It's because I saw an ad, and I'm like, wait a second, and then I realized that it was him. So anyway, this, like that's a clear benefit, I think. If you think also about the economy of content creators, my kids, well, they're not that young anymore, and we find a lot of really interesting stuff on YouTube. Like, for example, this is going to sound so nerdy, but I love watching videos both of physics and of calculus online. So you might think I'm crazy, but that's sometimes what I like to do, And I follow a bunch of creators on YouTube who are incredible. In fact, and I can tell you, no one is paying me for this, but I was just double checking the name because I get confused. There's one called 3 Blue 1 Brown. So 3 Blue 1 Brown is created by a person, by an ex Stanford graduate, and it's an incredible math YouTube channel, right? So this person is able to exist because there are recommendation algorithms that put their content in front of people, right? Other people might see this content and might go like, get this out of, I'm not interested at all, right? So I think content creators, and actually my guitar teacher is able to make a living because he actually teaches lessons that he puts out there, and he manages to make himself known because of recommender algorithms, right? So I could go on. There's a bunch of think about COVID, think about the pandemic, right? Like the ability to be connected to people and groups and content that matters to you. Honestly, the internet itself gets a lot of credit, of course, for having helped us make it through the pandemic. But then on top of the internet, you have this ability to distribute the right information to the right people, I think is extremely powerful and can only be done with AI. That's for some of the benefits. So I guess the reason I'm making such an important point here is that the reason we need to have the discussion is because in my opinion, we want to be able to have good recommender systems. We want them to add value. And for that reason, we need to do the extra work to understand the risks and to understand what the mitigations are. So when you think about risks, I'll just give a few examples, right? Quite clearly, if you think about recommender systems for dating apps, right? You can actually reinforce discrimination that exists in society. You can learn that certain types of people, other people don't want to contact them for some reason. And then you can, if there's an additional person that appears to be similar to some of these other people, they might be excluded as well, right? Because of, if you're not careful, this can be because you're using features like I don't know, location, where does this person live? Like certain zip codes in the US have income differences that are dramatic between them, right? So we're going to put everyone in low income zip codes in a bucket where they find it harder to meet other people, for example. If you're not careful, this could happen, right? Or are you going to, if you're using ML to provide job recommendations to people, right? Are you going to learn that certain groups of people don't apply systematically to the same jobs as others, right? Like we know there's studies that say that women are more conservative when it comes to applying to a job. They want to make sure that they're more prepared and qualified, whereas there's a bias where like, yeah, we're like men will do it anyway. And then if you're training your algorithm to say, oh, look, women are not applying to these high paid jobs, therefore I'm going to learn that the probability that they apply is low if you're a female, and therefore I'm not going to show you the recommendations. What the hell, right? That's completely broken, right? So there's a lot of risks of reflecting and amplifying biases and discrimination that exists in society. That's like risk example number one. Risk example number two, especially, my youngest daughter is 12 and a half, and my boy is 15, and the older is 18. They have grown up with the internet, and they have grown up with a device, a tablet, and a phone in their hand. And addiction is a real thing. A lot of the recommendation algorithms, in one form or another, try to maximize engagement. And I know that most companies I know and people I know have good intent and make a difference between meaningful engagement and engagement that is not meaningful, right? You don't want people to waste time watching harmful content. Nobody wants that. But still, if you're using AI and you're building an objective function with your best intent, right, it is gonna try to show people stuff that they will engage with, right? And more of it, right? And we've seen the risks. So you have, this is the way that if you're not careful, content that is maybe hateful or that provokes outrage will get people going, right? And if you don't think carefully about how you're optimizing, you're going to end up having addiction, and you're going to have mental harm. So you got to be careful with that. And then maybe as a corollary of this, it's interesting. I'm not super good at history, but I remember having read that when the radio came out in the 20s or whenever it was, in the 1920s, that one of the uses of the radio and of radio stations was political propaganda. And that there are many countries where that was the use, and it led to pretty dramatic polarization and radicalization. There's been very interesting studies about cable TV, where like once you go from a couple of broadcast stations to hundreds of channels, people end up living in a bubble, right, where you only see stuff that is similar to yours. And I've been reading a little bit about urban planning and about the concept of homophily, where people end up flocking with people who are very similar to them. It's not something that you're not born necessarily predetermined, knowing whom you're gonna like in terms of values or status. But I feel like there's some beautiful work from Columbia University by Laura Kurgan, and I'm happy to type the name in the chat. Laura Kurgan is a professor of architecture, and she's been studying urban planning, and she's been studying in the US the impact of how you encourage or discourage different people to live together, right? Like if you only build super expensive houses in an area, well, you know what you're going to get. If you build very mixed housing, you're going to get more diversity. And so she's looked at the intersection of civil rights and racial justice in the US and urban planning. And I feel like recommender systems, if you're not careful, they can kind of do similar things, right? They can sort of flock people together and put them in cliques where they see the same kind of stuff. And then you end up having polarization, division, radicalization, and things like that. So basically threats to democracy. When I joined Facebook, I mentioned the Arab Spring. I thought it was amazing that people could have a voice and express themselves. We've seen other examples where it goes the other way around, right? So it's a powerful tool, and it can go both ways.
Yeah, actually, I want to pick up on what you said earlier about people, actually the dating apps, right? Where, it can reinforce stereotypes and it can impact negatively on disadvantaged groups. On the other hand, though, I still know for a fact, because my friends in the LGBTQ community told me that it has been a blessing for some of these groups, because when the society was still not very open, it was difficult for them to meet potential partners, and social media and dating apps have been a blessing to these groups of people. And I know my dear friend who's in this community got married, and they have children and so on through meeting on these platforms. So to me, there's so much benefit, of course, as a technologist and somebody who's also an avid Facebook user, where I am in all these groups to learn about different things. For me, it's a learning tool, right? I personally think that the benefits should outweigh the harm, and our job really is to do the best. Maybe the best is not, we can still not good enough, but like trying as much as we can to prevent the harm. I think the benefits speak for themselves. And I think users of dating apps, social media, all these apps will find a way of using it to their own benefit. But when we build these algorithms and tools, users cannot come and touch the code, right? So we're the ones who are actually responsible for preventing harm. Okay. All people in the society can do, the most they can do is to regulate. Right. This is why there's this strong voice of regulation and all that, because that's all they can do. Right. But to prevent real harm, I think the field like AI, we need to focus. We should not treat responsible AI as like a workshop on the sideline of NeurIPS or workshop. I think it should be the main theme today. I think the main task of AI today should be responsible AI. Like all AI should be responsible.
Of course.
So this is how I feel. I think the benefits outweigh the harm, but we have to do actively prevent harm. Sorry, that's my own my own view. Actually, given the time, I would like to go to the next topic.
Perfect.
So we talked about how you deeply care about fellow human beings, to do AI responsibly, to build technology responsibly, right? So there's the other topic I would like to approach with you is that it is a very interesting to see that you announced on Facebook a few months ago, right, that you are stepping down, or to use to pervert a commonly known term, the book by Sheryl Sandberg on leaning, appealing to women to lean in. You actually chose to lean out and leave the corporate world and your career to stay home or to support your wife. And this is very rare. And a lot of people, or at least, I don't know whether it's rare for men to do so, but at least we don't hear about them. And for years, I have been saying, in anybody who's willing to listen, that in order for women to lean in, men have to lean in at home and in different ways, right? So I think, so what is your personal, what is your perspective? What made you make that decision and your motivation?
Yeah, it's first of all, I want to say it's a really difficult decision, because it's a decision, made in the context of things going really well for my career, and in the context of me being someone who has always been used to excel. Like since I was a kid going at school, I was educated that way, and I'm sure people will understand and identify with this. I'm sure many people have parents who expect that you have the best grades in the class and all these things, right? And the rank at the top and all these things, right? That's how I was brought up. That's where I come from, And that's been, at work, I've always given everything. I've always tried as hard as possible to do the best job possible, always. But at the same time, my wife, 15 years ago, when our second child was born, we have 3 kids. She had a really nice She had a really amazing job at the Federal Agency for the Environment in Germany, near Berlin. And we were living there. And then when our second child was born, she took a break, on an extended maternity break to look after him and look after our other daughter, who's 3 years older. And I kind of changed jobs in between while she was on maternity leave. You know, I went from being at the Max Planck Institute to taking this job at Microsoft Research in Cambridge in the UK. So we moved as a result of that, you know, and then basically for her to find a job again became harder, you know. And then the rest is history, you know. Then once she was feeling comfortable in the UK and was finding her footing, and our youngest daughter was, you know, no longer using diapers, and she could, you know, like be in daycare and also on. Then I found a job at Facebook, and we moved here, you know, uprooting, have to set up everything. So every time she's been the one who has sacrificed everything for us, for the family. And so I think one of the things that I'll also share is that there are many moments, I think, when you're very successful, where you get very confused about why are you not more happy. And I've had those moments where I've asked myself, I should be so happy, but I'm not. There are things somewhere that feel unsettled or wrong. And I eventually started to work with a therapist, which is something that, by the way, I cannot recommend this enough. When I was growing up, my family, you know, everyone around me would be completely opposed to anyone going to a therapist, because it means you're crazy, or it means something is not right with you, right? And now I view it more as a sports coach, right? If you're trying to get really good at tennis, at running, at skiing, or whatever, if you're trying to get good at life, you know, get a therapist, right? It makes sense. It's going to help you. So, and that therapist asked me a question. He said, well, because I was talking about anger issues or frustration issues, and this person asked me, well, how do you want to be remembered by the people who love you the most? How do you want to be remembered by your kids? You know, when you're old, right? And when you're dying, how do you want them to remember you? And that question really dug very deep. Like it took months, you know, of thinking about that. And then at the end, I thought, well, I want to be much more of a whole person. I don't want to be only a one-sided person. I don't only want to be this career guy. I want to be a whole person. And then I also thought about what is going to matter, you know, as I get older. I think what is going to matter is what is going to happen for sure is like the number of people who want to talk to me is going to decrease over time, because, you know, I'll be older, I'll have fewer interesting things to say, you know, it'll be like that. And then at the end of the day, the people that are going to exponentially matter the most to me are the people I love, the people who are close to me, right? And so these are pretty selfish arguments in a way, but that's where I sort of thought, well, that was sort of like one part of it, right? And then the other part of it is just a basic notion of justice, right, and fairness. And I'm like, how can I be working on fairness, you know, AI fairness, and then I'm not ready to walk the walk, right? I'm ready to talk the talk, but I'm not ready to walk the walk. What is this? Do I really want to be that person who talks the talk but does not walk the walk? And, you know, talking to my wife, I tried to say, let's hire more help at home. Let's hire, you know, more cleaning help. Let's hire people who can maybe do the groceries, whatever. And my wife, she can't. She's like, no. She's like, this has to be done right, and I want to do it. So it was only when then I thought, well, this is going to take that I do it myself. Like, it has to be me who does it. And so now if I look, you know, I left a month ago Facebook, right? I have done a lot of cooking. That's true.
Yes.
I like cooking.
Yes.
I've done a lot of cleaning, actually, although we have cleaners, but you always have to clean. And then I've done a lot of time with the kids. I've done a lot of driving them to all their extracurriculars. Right. I've done hours and hours of homework with them, so many hours. And I think now that my wife Ines sees that I'm taking care of that, now finally she's at the point where when I ask her, I say, hey, do you want to go take Pablo to cello, or should I do it? And now finally, now she can say, oh, no, you do it. Because now she went away from that mode where she thinks that she has to take care of everything.
Yeah, it's amazing because, you know, I often get asked, actually, a lot of women get asked the question, can women have it all, right? And it just dawned on me, you are this one guy who's having it all. You've had your career, you're still active in responsible AI, and you advise companies, and you take care of family, you enjoy your relationship with your family and supporting your wife. You are this one guy who's who's having it all. It's amazing. Yeah, so maybe I think our society is gradually going to change in terms of perspectives, right? Like if people see things, it's the reality is what we have today. But if people just get out of their boxes and to think, because I often also hear from men in Hong Kong, especially, who tell us that they would love to support their wife's career, but they are the ones who can bring more income to the family.
Yeah.
So they are actually optimizing the overall benefit to the family if the man and not the woman who goes to work, because the woman doesn't get paid enough compared to men. We all know that phenomenon, right? But then it's also self-fulfilling prophecy, it's self-reinforced. Companies and organizations pay women less because they don't think they need it, or it's just kind of unconscious bias, right? So the whole society sort of reinforces itself that way. And then, so neither men nor women can have it all. Nobody can have it all that way, right? So I think maybe you have found the formula for we all to have it all. It's really congratulations. And I know your cooking is amazing. And your family is so lucky to have you and your wife, like this is your kids are so lucky, I mean. And I know you do homeworks with your kids. I really envy that. I don't really do that, and I can't cook as well as you do. But it's amazing. I think maybe we should move towards thinking about how we can all have more happiness, right? Optimize for societal happiness overall. It's very interesting. It's the same thing with responsible AI, right? Maybe we should optimize for the overall happiness factor. And then because today we've seen a lot of negativity in the world, right, between different groups of people, different countries, and different beliefs, different faiths. So what can we do in responsible AI to build bridges, to promote more like a mutual benefits or overall benefit? That gives us a lot of food for thought. So for your, we can go back a little bit to, if you don't mind, we were talking about responsible, and now we talk about you and your family. So it's both the technology and the humanities, right? The human side of things and the technology side of things. How do you see we can? And earlier we said that people are not ready for AI, but then we say, ready or not, here it is, right? Okay, so how can we move forward, live in symbiosis, between human and machines, between the decisions made by algorithms and decisions made by humans, personal decisions like you have made, personal decisions of some people have made via using technology. There's a very profound change, right? Just in a very short amount of time, there's a very profound change in how the society operates. I don't know if you remember the days when we did not have smartphones, we did not have social media, even though we had email in the 80s already, but before we had smartphones, before we had social media, before there was dating apps, before there was any of this, right? People lived quite differently and people perceive things differently. And now this world has profoundly changed by technology. So how do you think, as a human being, like a person, how should we make choices, right? To use, and how can we use technology to help us, or, you know what I'm saying? I'm not being very articulate.
Well, I think there's a few things to tease apart. First, you were talking about maximizing income in deciding, you know, whether you stop working and let your spouse or your partner work.
Mm-hmm.
Look, if I work 2 more years, I will make more money than my wife will make for the rest of her career. That's assuming she takes the kind of job that she may like a city planner with a city of Mountain View or something like where we live, right? If she ends up doing something like that, and I work in a highly paid executive job in technology, that's the reality.
Mm.
So if we wanted to make 10 times more, then it should be me working. It's just as simple as that, right? But that cannot be the only choice, right? And I think that cannot be the only criterion for happiness, like you were saying, right? You have to zoom out and think broader. And I think that the thinking broader, the zooming out, I think that's the most important part. And I think the way we minimize risk as we build AI and the way we make better decisions is by building as diverse and inclusive teams as possible. Is by making sure that we don't have, again, things like face recognition algorithms only working for white men, you know. I'm thinking about Joy Boylan-Mooney and Timnit Gebru's excellent work on identifying these problems for pretty much any vendor of a face detection or recognition.